Welcome to the Outdoor Adventure Lifestyle Podcast, where we dive into inspiring stories, thrilling adventures, and expert insights from leaders and legends across the outdoor adventure community. Whether you're an avid hiker, passionate camper, or adventure traveler, each episode brings you up close and personal with guests who've lived it, explored it, and made it their mission to share their experiences with you. Let's get after it. Today we're talking with Norie Quitos. Norie is an independent journalist and editor. She is a contributor to National Geographic and the former executive director of National Geographic Traveler. She is also a communications consultant working with destinations and travel companies to find and tell their stories. Her work is focused on the areas of sustainable and responsible travel. Hey, Norie, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is going to be another exciting conversation. I get to talk to so many wonderful people. I have the luckiest job in the world. It's amazing.
Well, I'll compete with you for that because I feel like I've got the luckiest job in the world.
So. Oh, cool. Well, we'll get into that, I'm sure. We'll talk a little bit about that, yeah. Let's start off with your path to adventure, though. What first inspired you to tell travel stories, and how did that eventually lead to your role as executive director of National Geographic Traveler? That must have been a fun job.
Yeah, well, I grew up bicultural. So I was born in Philadelphia, and then I spent my early childhood in the Philippines, where my parents are from. Oh. And in fact, the story goes that my first trip was a transatlantic flight from New York to Manila when I was 6 months old on the iconic Pan Am jet. Wow. So, and by the age of 2.5, I'd made that trip 3 times. So wow. I don't remember them, of course, but I think that probably kicked off my love affair with cultures and languages and travel.
The wanderlust, yeah.
Yeah.
How did you end up at Nat Geo? That's a great gig. I love Nat Geo. Yeah.
Sure. So after that, my family moved to Washington, D.C. My dad worked for the World Bank, and I got a degree in African studies. I thought I would be a diplomat, but I always also loved to write, and I also loved the images. So that combination. So I used to do my own photo albums. I'd write the captions, and I was editor of my grade school, high school, and college yearbooks. So I think that pretty much eventually led me to a career in travel magazines. So first I was with Caribbean Travel and Life magazine, and then U.S. News, where I covered travel. And then that eventually led to that dream job at Nat Geo Traveler.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. How long were you there?
Almost 18, 19 years.
Wow, long time.
Yeah. I didn't want to tell you that. That dates me a bit.
Well, those of us that have been in this industry for a while, I was at Eagle Creek for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years ago maybe. So has the outdoor and nature always been a part of your life, or did you discover that later? How did that come about?
Yeah, great question. So I grew up with travel, but nature and the outdoors actually came later, much later. So after my family moved to the U.S. when I was 11, my 2 sisters and I, we were indoors suburban kids in Northern Virginia. Although, I don't know, now that I think about it, in the 70s, kids were always free ranging it outdoors. So we did that. So we certainly played outdoors all the time, right? Remember?
Yeah. And back when the streetlights come on.
Exactly. We went on picnics a lot, road trips. I ate a lot of packed sandwiches, and we did visit Shenandoah National Park, which is about an hour and a half away from me here. But I never went camping. And even as a young adult, my travel dreams were more about museums and cafes in Europe. And I always admired nature, but more from afar, more as a concept. And it wasn't until I was a single mom with 2 kids that I thought, hey, I want these kids to be closer to nature than I had grown up. Right. So I took them camping, first in my sister and brother-in-law's backyard, because they had all the equipment. Yeah. And then we'd go camping in the state parks of Maryland and Virginia, which is our local area. And then a few years later, I signed them up for this 4-night covered wagon adventure in Wyoming.
Wow. How fun was that?
Yeah, at the foot of the Tetons, where we slept in canvas tents, no shower for 4 days. One of my sons got leeches. They were practicing throwing axes and roping, and there was a black lab named Twister who was following them around. I mean, they just loved it. I, however, could not get past not being clean. I looked at the soles of my feet on day 4, and they were literally black.
Yeah. Should never do that.
No. And then at one point, this far more outdoorsy friend of mine, Nancy, who was there also with her grandchildren, she said to me, Norie, we're in the woods. It's dirt, but it's not dirty.
Right.
And then I just had this epiphany. I mean, it was this, I'm like, it's dirt, but it's not dirty.
Yeah.
So it was the beginning of this love affair with nature. And ever since then, I've embraced these outdoor natural experiences that I've been privileged to have.
That's awesome.
Yeah, like, I don't know, seeing the night sky in the Atacama Desert, hiking dunes, climbing these dunes in Namibia, kayaking in the fjords of Alaska's Inner Passage. Though I'm still not really a big camper, but at this point, it's not really a dirt thing as it is a bathroom thing.
Oh yeah, no, I can relate to that. Yeah, yeah.
And
I
these
never
days,
heard it put that way though. The dirt is not dirty. That's great. That should be a shirt.
yeah,
That should be a t-shirt.
isn't that good?
That's great. Yeah.
I mean, it really kind of was like, huh. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's awesome. Yeah.
And these days, I love to do more road biking. Road biking.
Is that your favorite thing?
Yeah, yeah. I actually took this epic month-long cycling trip in Turkey and Greece with this family-run Australian company named Bike Odyssey. And we went from like Troy. We were following in Odysseus's footsteps, the Greek hero.
Wow. Cool.
And it was amazing. We just started in Troy and then hopped around the different islands and then ended up in Ithaca, which is very appropriate because that's where Odysseus ends up after 10 years. We took a month. He took 10 years.
We did the fast forward route, right? You did the fast forward route. Yeah. So.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
That's how this all works.
The graybeards these days.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So you're now an independent journalist, editor, and consulting. How has that shift from traditional editorial role to multifaceted work changed your work and maybe your life?
So in some ways, a lot. It certainly broadened my perspective. I was looking at things from many different angles. I also got introduced to the adjacent industries and sectors such as the outdoor industry, international development, and the world of conservation. And so I came to basically understand this complex ecosystem from all sides in a way that I really hadn't before. But I'm also still actually telling and shaping stories. So that part hasn't really changed. As a journalist, I'm still writing pieces for Nat Geo and others. In fact, I have a new piece out on the Nat Geo website right now on the new astrotourism trail in Tucson, Arizona. Yeah, it's the U.S. city with some of the darkest skies in the country. And so many amateur and professional astronomers live there. There's even a theme bar with telescopes on the patio that you can look through while you're having your solar oven-fired pizza and cosmic jello shots. So I get to tell those types of stories. And as a consultant, I work with destinations and travel companies developing pitch-worthy story ideas. I edit newsletters. I work on white papers. So it's fun. I get to meet interesting people, ask stupid questions, visit amazing places, try new things. I'm always learning. So that's what I love about what I'm doing now.
Yeah, the visiting amazing places is always fun, isn't it?
It is.
Do you have a favorite place that you like to go back to?
Oh, I always say it's the last place I've been to. So basically that's probably Panama. Well, I was just in California not so long ago, but before that I was in Panama and I toured the Panama Canal region, which was fascinating mix of diverse cultures in such a small little package of a country.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, I haven't been there. That's still on the list. So you've been a strong voice for responsible travel for years too. What changes have you seen in how destinations and travelers approach sustainability?
When I was first starting out in the late 90s and early 2000s, sustainable travel was really niche. People who were traveling to an eco lodge in Costa Rica were seen as hippies and backpackers. So it was all very fringe at that point in time. Now, of course, sustainability has gone mainstream and hotel bed sheets and towels aren't washed every day, even in the nicest resorts. More travelers are carrying reusable water bottles. So all of this, there's much better sustainable infrastructure. So all that obviously is a good thing, but that's not nearly enough. Travel has returned with a vengeance. It's back to near 2019 levels. Last year, there were 1.4 billion international tourist arrivals. So merely sustaining things isn't going to cut it. So more and more, the thinkers and leaders that I follow say that we need a new model, and they're calling it a regenerative model for tourism. And so what does that mean? It's at its simplest, it's tourism that actively restores the environments, communities, and cultures that are impacted by tourism or climate change or war, you name it, all the problems that we've caused, essentially. And the goal isn't to just maintain it, but to leave destinations in a better condition than they were found. So to do this, what they're saying is we need to first drastically change our perspective about travel. Destinations aren't what we see as cash cows that exist to bring in money, which is how countries often look at their places, their destinations, but places to be stewarded for future generations. And we need to change how we think of travel vendors like hotels and restaurants. Those are hosts. And the traveling consumer, you and me, were guests. And once we embrace this paradigm shift, and many already have, all sorts of wonderful things can happen in the world of tourism. And that could be, for example, a tourism board deciding not to run advertising for its own city because it already gets too many visitors. Amsterdam did that.
Oh, really? Interesting.
And,
they did.
Yeah. Huh. Or there's another tourism board, Vancouver, which turned itself into a social enterprise so they changed their priorities from a purely business model to prioritizing also community, culture, and environment, as well as business. Or hotels like Fogo Island Inn in Newfoundland, Canada, which offers an amazing luxury experience, but it was designed by a local visionary, Zita Cobb, to showcase and support local artisans and then revive local economy. So tourism can exist in a very different type of structure.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that someone's paying attention to that too, because I think we've seen it in our cities, especially those of us who live in California and stuff. We've just seen things just explode. And I've been in places around the world, the same kind of things happen. So that's interesting.
Exactly.
Would you say Amsterdam is kind of the leader? They nailed it, so to speak. Is there anybody else that comes to mind?
Well, the Nordic countries do a great job at it. Amsterdam, certainly.
Copenhagen's great.
Yes. I think they probably, Canada does a great job. They also have embraced kind of a more holistic regenerative model.
Yeah. It'd be good to see a lot of more folks jump on that bandwagon, that's for sure. So you recently wrote the intro to a book about women over 50 traveling solo. That's such a rich and often unrepresented topic. What surprised you the most during the research for that project?
Yes. So it's the first of a 3-part book called Never Too Late. And the authors are actually Carolyn Ray and Lola Akinmadi. And it's published by Journeywoman, which is one of the oldest and largest global communities of women travelers. So right now it's in PDF form. And once the 3 parts are done, then it will be published as a print book.
Excellent.
But what surprised me the most was that women, as they get older, are way more adventurous than men when it comes to travel. At least that's what the statistics say.
Interesting.
So 85% of solo travelers are women, and approximately 75% of those who engage in adventure, nature, or cultural trips are also women. Beyond that, women over 50 represent the fastest growing demographic in travel and then hold billions of dollars in purchasing power. And they make 85% of all travel-related decisions. All this runs counter to the prevailing narrative about older women, and so much as there even is a narrative, because this demographic often finds themselves invisible or ignored by society, in the media, in the movies, in business.
That's interesting. I wonder, is the guys just get lazy maybe when they get in their older age, or feel like they've been there?
I can't begin to guess what the guys are up to. Often, the women seem to drag some of the guys around, I think, because they're making travel decisions. That doesn't mean they're just always traveling by themselves, but it does appear that I can only read what the statistics say, so I can't really guess beyond that. But making the travel decisions doesn't mean that they're not necessarily always traveling by themselves. Yeah.
I have a couple of friends, a couple of couples that say they do that. They in their older ages, they've just not stopped, right? They just keep going and go to
They
more
keep
exotic
they
places.
keep
And I think
going. Yeah.
people have more resources available so they can go further and do,
Yeah.
give
And
back
in
and do
fact,
other
I was
things.
very inspired by the women I interviewed. And some of these women are traveling independently into their 90s. I interviewed
Wow.
one woman named Violet, and she didn't start traveling until her 70s, and that was after she became a widow.
Hmm.
And she's now 94, and she says travel is what keeps her alive.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. That's the beauty of travel. I
yeah,
think it does keep you young and it keeps you
it
engaged
sure
and
does, I think.
challenges you sometimes. Yeah, that's awesome. So, as someone who works with destinations to help them tell better stories, what advice do you give them to cut through the noise and really connect with today's adventure travelers?
So sometimes it's about telling better stories, and we can address that with better writing skills or better outreach techniques. But often I've seen it's about having better stories to tell. So many destinations chase visitor numbers. That's traditionally how success is measured in the business. And it doesn't matter what kind of visitor or how much they spend or cost. And this is the wrong road. It's the road to homogeneity. I'm sure you've driven through places like this,
Yep.
cookie cutter places. You
Yep.
can't tell one place from another, right?
Mhm.
So my advice would be to figure out what makes your place unique. And it often starts with the residents. Listen to them. What it is that would make them flourish. How can you help solve their problems? A good place to live makes a great place to visit. And then residents can then become your best ambassadors. So if they love where they live and work and play, they can tell the most authentic stories, and the right kinds of visitors will come. So there's this classic example, this great ad campaign by the Swedish Tourist Board a couple of years ago, and it allowed anybody from around the world to call a designated phone number and be randomly connected with a Swedish resident. I mean, just imagine that,
That's
right?
great.
What would you say about your new place, Rick, where you live? I mean, so
Yeah.
it's little wonder that Sweden ranks really high in places to live, best places to live, and I can attest that it's a wonderful place to visit.
Yeah. 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 I think all those countries up there are great to visit. They're just so clean and the people are so warm and welcoming. And it's
Yeah,
just, there's
but you
a
don't
lot of
even
great
have to go.
adventures to do.
Sure, sure. You don't even have to go that far. I spent 5 days a couple months ago, kind of tooling around the central coast of California, kind of between Monterey Bay and south of Monterey Bay and north of Santa Barbara along
Yep.
Highway 1, that
Yep.
area.
Yep.
Well, you must know it, the San Simeon, Cayucos, of Avila Beach. I hadn't been
Right.
there,
Oh, wow. It's
but
beautiful there. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, the biggest town is San Luis Obispo, and it's not even that big, right? And I
Right.
went in the winter, so it felt very open and beautiful and untrammeled. But so these towns have what we call character, right? But that's because so many of the businesses that are small and owner operated, and not many chain stores. There was a great breakfast place with a line out the door that served blue corn waffles. I mean, family
Wow.
run. So
Oh, cool.
and then I stayed in one of those roadside motels that had been converted and
Hmm.
but retains its character. My favorite part was going on a seafood tour in the intertidal flats of that coast, and
Hmm.
there was
Hmm.
a local expert, this guy named Spencer. And he's a guy who just works at the local university, but who developed a passion and expertise for seaweed of all things.
Wow.
And so he self-taught, and then he taught our little group how to forage sustainably. You're supposed to just cut off the tops and leave the roots that stuck, the whole fast at the bottom, to leave that be. And then he cooked up what we had harvested, and with some ramen, some soy sauce, and right on the beach there. And
Wow.
now,
That'd be
now
great. What an
that's unique.
experience. Yeah. What an experience.
That's the kind of travel that is memorable.
Yeah. When you get those experiential things that it just cements their memory in your brain and your whole body because you have the taste of the food and the spray of the salt air. And it's just fantastic. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, the best example that I can think of where destinations prioritize residents and support their voices is in Canada with the growth of its Indigenous tourism. And I took this wonderful walking tour in Stanley Park, right in the middle of Vancouver, with an Indigenous guide. The tour is called Talking Trees, I think.
Hmm.
I mean, who better to tell the
Right.
story of the place, right,
Right.
than the original stewards of the land who have been there for thousands of years.
Yeah, yeah. And he heard it from the original people and passed down,
Yes, yes.
That's
yeah.
awesome. That's very cool, yeah. So you also serve on the board of the Adventure Travel Conservation Fund and started the industry auction. How did that come about, and what kind of impact has it had over the years?
Thanks for asking. That volunteer role is one of the most rewarding things that I do, honestly.
Yeah, that's a great group. Yeah.
Yeah. So the ATCF is for your listeners who may not be familiar, it's an organization of small and medium-sized adventure travel and gear companies who come together to support the conservation of places around the world where travelers visit. And the ATCF does that with several initiatives, but the main one is awarding grants to grassroots and community conservation projects. And in 6 years, we've awarded almost $600,000 to 39 projects in 23 countries. And so these are projects like training local women in Indonesia to scuba dive and restore degraded coral reefs, or putting out of work horse guides in Chile early in the pandemic to work on trail maintenance so that they could maintain their livelihoods, and monitoring a rare species of lion that climbs trees in Uganda, for example.
Wow.
And our biggest fundraiser is this annual auction, which has become the largest and most respected adventure travel and gear auction that benefits conservation. So last year, through incredible donations from our members, we auctioned off over 60 trips and gear items. And these trips are like a 9-day trek in Jordan, an e-bike tour in New Zealand, rafting on the Snake River, hiking in Ireland, a cruise by small ship in the Galapagos. So all of these are respected, vetted companies like World Expeditions, Quasar, Row, Enchanted Expeditions, Mountain Lodges of Paris, like so many. The list is on our website, actually. And some of your past guests have been generous donors. Experience Plus, for example, Tierra de Volcán, Ciclissimo Clásico. So, and that's just the trips. On the gear side, Eagle Creek, actually, your former, they're generous. We're one of our members and very generous. Peak Design, Toad & Co., Patagonia, Helinox, the list goes on. And you asked how it started. At a small startup nonprofit, when you have an idea, they make you the committee lead.
That's right. I know Steve Barker very well. I know how that goes.
Okay, well, so you know how
shout out to you, Steve. You and Nona, Steve. Good job.
That's right. Well, so you know how they operate. So I knew, none of us knew anything about putting on an auction. I mean, we're mostly volunteers. But that first year, I think we made $6,000. But we've learned a lot since like 6 years ago. And last year we raised $114,000, all of it feeding into the conservation efforts that we do.
Well, we'll be sure to link to that in the show notes too, so people can support
please.
It and go. Yeah, exactly.
That would be great. Yeah, we're gearing up for our fall auction in September.
Oh, cool, awesome, good timing. Yeah.
Are you a solo business owner, freelancer, or sole proprietor? If you're a podcaster, author, photographer, etc., there's a good chance you're like me. You hone your craft, deliver the goods, pay the bills, make the sales, send the invoices, and on it goes. There's always something else to remember. FreshBooks is an accounting software designed for folks like us. The software makes it easy to stay organized, keep track of payments owed and expenses made, send invoices, and accept payments. While there are many accounting software options out there, FreshBooks is particularly well suited for smaller businesses and companies with one main owner and operator. Go to ricksays.com/freshbooks. Get some help today. That's ricksays.com/freshbooks. Get more time to focus on the content, not on the books.
So with all the climate and conservation challenges we're facing, what are your thoughts about the responsibilities of each traveler, and especially those of us with a platform that we can talk about it and share the appropriate practices and all those things?
Yeah. A couple of years ago, I wrote a piece aimed at my fellow media people, and it was called "Why Responsible Writing is as Vital as Responsible Travel." And the gist of it was that those of us who communicate for a living, like me, like you, or anyone else really who has a following, we have superpowers in that we have platforms or otherwise greater influence than the normal traveler.
Right.
And I think that means that we also have a greater responsibility.
Yep.
So what we do when we travel matters, obviously, but what we write about or post about when we travel matters even more. And so what can we do? We can choose very carefully what we cover and write about. I like to shine a light on the good guys, for example. And if they're not the good guys, then we don't have to give them ink or airtime, right?
Yeah.
And then it's our homework, I think, to figure out who are the good guys and who are the not so good guys.
Yeah, that's right.
So I also warn against posting pictures of myself or yourself feeding, petting, or riding wild animals. And I don't want to make a blanket statement. There are some instances where it's done in the right way. There an elephant rescue sanctuary, for example, that doesn't neglect or doesn't abuse its animals.
Yep.
So what's the harm in a photo, right? But for every good outfit doing things the right way, there are probably 100 doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And I think it's too easy to get it wrong. So do your homework and support the animal rehabs and rescues monetarily, but opt not to do these close encounters, and definitely don't post them on the socials, because in this fast scrolling world that we live in, where you get 3 seconds of someone's attention, if you're lucky,
Yep.
all people will see is an image of you and some wild animal, petting a wild animal or feeding whatever. And they will assume that if you did it, it must be okay to do.
That's right.
And if you absolutely have to do it, give a ton of context and explain, use it as a teaching moment or in a learning opportunity to explain the right way to do it. But, for me, I now know better. And so I no longer do that. I'm very careful.
Yeah, that's good advice, because we've all been there. We know how that works, and we've been on the other side of it, and we know the care and the time and that everybody goes into to help those animals and help that wildlife. And
exactly,
sometimes when you just see that shot with you on the back of it, you miss all the preamble, right?
You miss all the preamble, the context, the why we've done it a certain way, et cetera.
Yeah. So how can the outdoor and adventure travel industry do a better job representing the different voices and experiences, especially when it comes to age and gender and background?
The nonprofit Travel Unity did a survey a couple years ago and found out that the majority of travel companies don't make public or even announce when they have a job opening.
Really?
According to the statistic, meaning that it's the people that they know who are getting hired. And that puts people of color and those from marginalized communities at a great disadvantage. Because how can you even consider a different type of candidate when you're not even advertising? And
if you're pulling from your network, you're going to get the same. Your network's we're all the same within our networks, right? Some of us have very diverse networks, but for the most part, it's all our buddies and friends and family.
Right. So the first thing I'd encourage people to do would be to any job openings, get it out there as far and wide as possible. So you get as big a pool of applicants.
Better choice to choose from, right? A better group to choose from when it's broader and wider, because if it's like we talked about earlier, all the things that you do with your friends, it just becomes sameness. But if you broaden out and get new folks applying, then you can get more diversity. And that's interesting. So after all the travels and work in the field, what does adventure mean to you these days? And has it changed over time?
Well, I like to think adventure is anything that can be seen as a challenge, something that's outside your comfort zone, something that seems scary to you. And I like this definition because it meets people where they are and hopefully helps move them kind of notch by notch, gradually, right? Whether that's fitness or opening up one's mind or personal transformation, and ideally becoming better stewards of this planet. And sometimes adventure can be the tiniest things.
Right.
And, it allows you to see things in a different way. I remember taking a walk with a friend in Ecuador, and we were going through this stand of trees, and I don't know, there was just something about the light. And I made a comment about it, like, wow, I don't know why this looks so different. And he reminded me that he's like, close to the equator, the shadows aren't as long and than what you're used to in more northerly or southerly latitudes, which of course I knew intellectually, but I just hadn't realized the difference it can make just on the ground. And so these little nuggets of insight, even that's adventure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And sometimes too, it's a very tame adventure until something goes a little wrong. Not way wrong, but something breaks or something. You get a flat tire out in the jungle somewhere. It's like, okay, well now this thing has changed a little bit. So that makes it exciting
and
too.
as a writer, that's what makes our stories better. Yeah, if everything goes too perfectly, then it's kind of boring.
That's right. Yeah. So looking ahead, what's giving you hope or lighting you up right now in the world of travel, storytelling, and conservation?
Well, in terms of conservation, I think we find ourselves at a moment in time where things are looking pretty bleak.
We've kind of gone backwards a bit, haven't we?
Yeah. I mean, our existential problems haven't gone away and current events are making things worse, right?
Yeah.
However, I try to be optimistic. And in my professional and volunteer work, it allows me to meet people and learn about groups in this country and around the world making a positive impact, often against all odds. I met this veterinarian, Dr. Gladys Kalima, and she works to save mountain gorillas in Uganda. And as if that weren't cool enough or important enough, she also started a nonprofit to keep the human population living in the nearby communities healthy as well. Because as she told me, the health of wildlife and the health of humans are absolutely interconnected. So people like that just inspire me every day to do something. And then, of course, every project that the ATCF has funded. I mean, these are people heading up organizations to clean up oceans or protect tigers or sea turtles and restore habitats and educate youth. And all these people know that it's an interconnected planet that we live in. And by saving nature and these places that we visit, we actually are saving ourselves. And so all of that just gives me hope every day.
Yeah, it's interesting how sometimes I think we get caught up on all the things that need to be fixed, but there's a lot of things going right for sure. And sometimes when you see those, it kind of gives you hope and it reminds you that, but we still got to keep working at it.
We do.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So what's next for you?
Well, a trip out west, actually, for a mix of personal and work. My son is getting married in the San Francisco Bay Area next month.
Congratulations.
And then, thank you. And then some board work for the ATCF in Boulder. And then right after that, I'll be heading to, we're heading to Elevate, a travel conference in Denver. And then after that, I don't really have any fixed plans. I'd like to get back to Canada, and I may house sit for a friend who lives in Vancouver Island. So that's like a nice thing to do. There's a potential trip to the Badlands of North Dakota.
Cool.
And I don't know, I'd like to do another cycling trip. Cycling is something I love to do, and I love trips with built-in exercise.
No, that's a good idea. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Okay, these are probably some of the toughest questions I asked. The first one is, what is your favorite book? That might be easy for you, though. I have a hunch.
Well, yes, there is one book that I always recommend, and a friend recommended it to me a few years ago, and it's still my favorite book. It's called The Good Ancestor, and it's by Roman Znorik. He's a philosopher. But it's an easy read. It's not difficult or dense, really. And it's about the importance of long-term thinking to save society from the problems that have resulted from us being so short-sighted.
Yep.
And the book just rewires your brain to take in the longer view with all these wonderful examples and concepts. And you probably heard about seventh generation decision making, which is this indigenous concept of thinking through the impact down 7 generations before you make a decision.
Right.
And so it talked about that. It talked about the related concept of cathedral thinking, where those who design and start to build a cathedral know that they will never live to see the final product, but they do it anyway for future generations. That's one of my favorite books. And One I'm listening to right now on Libby that I just started. It's called An Immense World, and it's by the science journalist Ed Yong. And I'm not very far into it, but it's about kind of the rich sensory world of animals and how there's so much vast and unexplored worlds that we as humans can't even grasp.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Amazing.
Yeah, and we're all just scratching the surface of everything. I mean,
Exactly.
We're here a short time, even though we think it's 80 years is forever, but it's a real short time. And yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah. Do you have a favorite piece of adventure gear under $100?
So I try to buy secondhand when I can. And so my favorite red puffy jacket, which I'm actually wearing right now, you can't see, but is from Patagonia's used online marketplace.
Okay.
And it was definitely under $100. So, and it's actually a large kid size, which fits me better than their women's sizes.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Have you noticed more and more companies are doing that? They have these resale programs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they make
also
too
have
much
this
stuff. My whole thing about all these companies, being in the outdoor industry a long time, people are tired of hearing this, but we still make too much stuff.
Yes.
We need to run out of stuff.
Well, that's why these resale programs are great, because it becomes this circular economy. So I also have this favorite purple Toad & Co. dress, which I love, that I found at a thrift shop. And it's actually vintage because the label still says Horny Toad, which is their old name. And so that dress is at least like 10 or 15 years old.
Wow, very cool. Yeah. And do you have any advice for our listeners before we go to wrap?
Well, one, I just want to thank you for inviting me. And I'm chuckling a bit because the 12-year-old me would be astounded to find out that the grown-up me is a guest in this outdoor lifestyle podcast. And considering, this suburban indoors kid that I was. So I'm just really grateful that nature and the outdoors have become part of who I am. And I would love for others to discover that as well. So thanks for all the work you do. I hope it motivates people to not only fall in love with nature and the outdoors, but to also take the long view and then do something that helps preserve that for future generations. So,
well, it's people like you why I do it. I think there's so many of us out here that are fortunate to live and work in the outdoor adventure world. And I think it's our responsibility to influence it and help protect it and save it. And so all our younger generations and the future generations can enjoy it as well. So thanks for doing all you do.
Well, and thanks to you as well for getting the message out there.
Yeah, glad to do it. Well, thanks for coming on the show, and we'll talk soon.
Great, thanks.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Outdoor Adventure Lifestyle Podcast. Be sure to visit our website, ricksays.com, where you'll find show notes and links to everything we talked about and more. And while you're at it, if you found value in this show, give us a rating on Apple Podcast, or spread the word and tell a friend. That would really help us out too. Be sure to tune in every week, and thanks again for listening to the Outdoor Adventure Lifestyle Podcast.